the Y. Clinton Yates, welcome back. This is Parker Bell. We're here for another episode of Blue Review. CY, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Speaking of LAX, my brother was in town and he just made it out of LAX today. Lickety split. True story. His plane was at 7 a.m. He woke up at 6:15 a.m. He made the plane. Just so
Come
you
on
know.
now.
Yeah, I'm dead serious. It was pretty wild. So, LAX, big shouts to you.
That's right. As you know, Blue Review is presented by Los Angeles International Airport. Hire LAX can create life-changing career opportunities for Los Angeles residents. And for more information, go ahead and check out Hire LAX on Eventbrite. So today, CY, on this Wednesday, the 30th, few things we got on hand to talk about. Mookie, of course, is continuing to mash, tying his career best at 36. Kershaw doing his thing. I know we talked about in last episode how long can he keep this up,
Right.
but it looks like he can do it for a while at the pace he's going, and he ties Don Drysdale for 209. So let's start with Mookie real quick. I mean, this is a season that we haven't seen from anyone since maybe like a Trout. Obviously, Acuna's kicking butt over there with the Braves,
Right.
but what can you say about Mookie and his level of play this year?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head saying this is a season we haven't seen from anybody. But I think more specifically, it's a season that the Dodgers have not yet seen from Mookie. Now, Mookie is a great player. Don't get me wrong. His numbers, in 2020 or last year rather, they were sort of like big numbers in bunches in some months and not much in the other. He's been more consistent this year. He's been better this year. The bat, he's got 36 home runs. I mean, his career high was only last year. Like, this is not like him suddenly coming out of nowhere. He is improving on what was a great season last season. And I think as much as anything, it's necessary. At this point, we talked a couple of weeks ago about who's actually the most valuable player on this team, who's actually in the MVP race versus Acuna, who, by the way, is doing all sorts of things, stealing bags like crazy in Atlanta. Like, this guy's just all over the shop. But I do think if you were to actually define the word value, Mookie is more important to the Dodgers than Acuna is to Atlanta. I feel like Atlanta could find somebody that still is going to do the same things, but the team would still be as good. They have like 8 All-Stars. You know what I mean? And so while he might be the best player on the best team, I do not know, in fact, if his value is higher per his own team, because also, let us never forget this, Mookie is playing multiple positions this year in multiple places. We're not talking about a guy who's switching between left and right field. This guy's played second, short, and right this season, which in general is just kind of amazing to see. Not that we're surprised, Mookie came up as an infielder, et cetera, but still, it's really impressive. And if I'm voting today, I'm voting for Marcus Lindbatz for MVP.
Yeah, I like that. And the comparison to the Braves, I mean, even their I'm blanking real quick. Yeah, their pitching has been insane this year.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like second or third in ERA. It's not just Acuna, even though he is having a historical season.
Right.
You make a great point. Mookie is just all over the field, carrying this team alongside Freddie on their backs.
Right.
And of course, we got some guys who are hitting dingers helping that offense, but it's those two for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And last night was a perfect example. They jumped up early, got a bunch of first inning runs. That's how they're going to have to win games, Parker. You know what I mean? If we're talking about the playoffs, that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to chase pitchers and arms early so that you give yourself a chance and you give your own pitchers more confidence.
Yeah, and that they did for Kershaw last night, tying the Dodgers' Don Drysdale with 209. So he's only 20-something away from Sutton at 233 for the Dodgers record. Clayton Kershaw, I mean, CY, just speak on his greatness a little bit and how he's still able to do it this year. He's adding pitches this year. I mean, what is it about him at this age that he can just continue at this level?
I think he's one of those guys that understands his own body very, very well. It's been a couple seasons now that we've gone through this routine of, okay, Kersh will probably start opening day or something close to it. Kersh will probably be at an all-star level to the all-star break. And then Kersh is going to shut it down for a little bit, and then he's going to come back. It's worked to varying degrees of success. And sometimes it is it has not exactly been planned. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, dang it. Okay, well, this is the time. This year it felt more sort of like, well, he knows when this is going to happen. We are understanding within the schedule of his operation how this is going to be built in. And it's worked out well, not just timing-wise for him personally, but for the team. Can you imagine if he was going through this right now and not playing and not pitching? They'd be awful. They would have nobody to really pace their rotation, and they would have nobody to really get these wins because the wins still matter at this point from a simple W standpoint. So there's that element of it within this season. The second part of it is that I really do appreciate the fact that he's not pitching like a guy on a one-year deal. Now, Kershaw's obviously a Dodger for life. He's obviously a guy that, you know, is certainly going to go into the Hall of Fame as a Dodger. That's not even close. That's who he's played for. But, like, you know, it was kind of a situation where you thought to yourself, well, how long is this going to last? You know what I mean? And maybe that's going to affect approach in some way. Not to say that he's not a professional, but human nature is what it is. And you just never know how things go when you're not sort of locked up on the long-term deal. Not that he needs that, but it was just a little different. You know, I feel that his professionalism has really shown a lot this season. He's never been the loudest guy. He's never been the kind of guy that was a rah-rah dude. So while the Mookies, the Freddies of the world have sort of taken that kind of outward role, I think Kersh has still been who he is. We talked the other day about who might be the most famous actual athlete in Los Angeles. And I mean, we talked about it at the station. And a lot of people said, well, Mookie's got to be the biggest LA athlete right now. And I was like, not so fast, my friend. As long as Clayton Kershaw is around, and as long as Clayton Kershaw is playing and pitching at the level that he's pitching at, he's still, to me, the fan favorite of Dodgers, at the very least, in this town, and maybe even athletes in general. If you want to throw the Lakers, the Kings, and all these other teams in there, never mind the football squads, just in terms of the longevity, the faith, and, you know, the fanhood. People love Kersh, and they should, because the guy's great.
Yeah, the longevity is insane. I mean,
you're not going to see that like that in coming years. You know, we've talked about guys who've got double TJs all over the place. It's hard to imagine a situation where a guy throws for that long for one team, sort of ever again kind of thing, which is weird to think about. But, you know, it's true. Guys just don't get chances like that. Guys aren't that good enough or that long enough to garner that kind of respect. Clayton Kershaw has absolutely done that.
Yeah, and shout out to him for adding that split change like a couple months ago, literally halfway through the season, just decided, you know, not many guys can do that and even boost their career even longer. I personally think that added another 1 or 2 years to his career.
I think so too, because when you add it up to the rest of his off-speed stuff, that's just another one to keep you off balance. So while he might not have the velo that he once did, he can still mix it up and he can pitch, which is different than throwing. A lot of guys out here, again, I hate to keep returning to these injury things, they throw. They don't necessarily pitch. They're just going for velo. They're just going for gas, locating secondary, body types and arm, you know, care secondary. Kershaw's the guy that's really figured it out, and adding things to his repertoire at this stage is just a function of how smart he is, as much as how skilled he is as a baseball player.
Yeah. Now, okay, so one other thing happened yesterday that I know you guys got a chance to talk about a lot on the shows. The team down south, the Halos. Oh boy, where do we even start? Yeah. Complete fire sale. Players that they picked up during the trade deadline, they now get rid of alongside Hunter Renfroe, right fielder, Matt Moore, right-handed pitcher, Reynaldo Lopez, and, of course, the biggest draw, Giolito, who at the time when they traded
made
for
available
him.
As well, by the way.
Yeah, Grichuk. And even last week I read that they did put Anderson on waivers, but nobody claimed him, so he elected to stay with him.
Okay.
But, of course, let's just talk about this. How can this impact the Dodgers, if at all, being that they're so low in the pecking order of those waiver claims?
So we could have done a whole show on this, but I'll keep it relatively brief. There's a couple things that make this an issue, I think, now for the Dodgers in terms of it being a priority. Number one, the obvious one, which is the injury element. The Dodgers are not really into picking up a ton of damaged goods. They're not the kind of team that's willing to just bring somebody in just because they're a name. There's that element in terms of a roster construction standpoint. There's also the question of, like, what is Shohei's actual value at this stage? Because, look, a UCL injury requiring Tommy John doesn't mean that you can't bat. It doesn't mean that you can't play. But if it means that you can't pitch, well, then that whole question of $600 million and all this other stuff because you're getting a Cy Young guy and an MVP guy, I'm not sure how realistic it is to expect him to be able, to be a starter again. You know, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. And if he comes back as a reliever, even though that means he could probably throw more days in a week, if it takes 2 years to happen and he's a hitter in the interim, it's just a different calculus altogether in terms of what you're getting out of the player. And the last thing about this, which is something that Travis and I talked about a lot, which is like Shohei Ohtani operated in basic sort of, you know, he operated on his own schedule with the Halos. He could do what he chose, his throwing programs, how he conditioned all that. He set those with his people. I don't know if that's something that the Dodgers are just going to say, oh, okay, do whatever you like. Like, I don't feel that they're that kind of a franchise. And I'm not saying that Shohei is some diva, not remotely, but if he does things the way that he does things and he gets the results the way that he gets his results, well, then it's a reasonable expectation for him to go to a team and say, nah, I'm doing it the way I want to do it. And I don't necessarily know if that jives with the Dodger way. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just philosophies could butt heads. And so him not being at his top form physically, I think drastically changes what the demand is for a team like the Dodgers who, you know, as we've stated, obviously need pitching. But do they really need another left-handed bat who's an outfielder who is a DH? Like, okay, maybe, you know, that's a replacement for a JD Martinez per se, or whoever may or not be playing on the team. If, let's just say, J-Hay decides, you know, to move on. But Shohei hasn't played that much outfield in a while. Plays a lot of first base, plays a lot of DH. It's just a different situation now because his availability on one of the things he was best at is no longer there in the same way. They could have used the pitcher a lot more than they could have used the hitter. And the pitcher is no
100%.
longer available. So I do think that changes things quite a bit for Friedman and them because you don't want to get into a bidding war with a team that isn't as good and is kind of just trying to get the name as much as they're trying to get the player if you don't actually need the player that much.
Yep. Interesting.
Yeah.
So let's say that's kind of the mindset they lean with. So we come back here to the present. With these kind of names that teams are dropping on the waivers, some of these relief pitchers, do you think the Dodgers pull the trigger then in order to get that instant, you know, maybe playoff pitcher
I would go after
like a Reynaldo Lopez from the
I would go after Giolito. I mean, he was rumored in the talks when the first trade this season's trade deadline came around. You know, him going to a different part of Southern California was moderately surprising. LA guy Giolito is. I think he, like, especially under these circumstances, this is a great way to get a guy. You know, you don't have to be like, oh my God, the Dodgers are so genius, as I've said before. Hey, no, dude's available. You need guys. Get a guy. And, you know, look, it's also really unfortunate because I feel like on some level, the Halos, this is baseball malpractice. You should not be able to waiver wire people you just traded for at the trade deadline that you gave up draft picks for. That feels like it should be against the rules just because it kind of gives a tanking vibe. It's just a big white flag energy that I don't love, which is a whole other discussion about like what the viability is of the Angels franchise from a baseball standpoint where they are, which I don't really feel like getting into. But like, if I'm Rob Manfred, I'm like, dude, what are we doing?
You can't just rage quit in a fantasy
exactly.
league.
That's exactly
essentially what they did.
That's the perfect word, Parker, because it just doesn't make sense. That's not how anybody does anything, and there's certainly no success rate for that kind of operation. You know. Rosters wise, and you're right, the rage quitting is just not cool. It just never mind, it doesn't work. If I'm another team in the league, I'm just like, oh my God, Halos, can you get it together? Some of us are trying to compete here, but not all of us have monster TV contracts, so we can just waste money left and right. It's ridiculous.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of teams competing, the Dodgers look to sweep the Diamondbacks, and Ryan Pepio will be on the mound. So maybe they don't even need pitching. Maybe Pepio becomes the savior.
We'll see about Pepio. I'll let him cook for the moment, but you know they definitely need some arms, if you ask me.
That's right. Let him cook. Yeah. All right. This has been Clinton Yates alongside Parker Bell for the Blue Review. We'll catch you next time.